In 2025, big tech spending on AI infrastructure topped more than $400 billion, surpassing the global investment in oil and gas production. By the end of 2026, that number is to be over $700 billion. Meanwhile, Meta's Hyperion campus, rising out of rural Louisiana at a projected cost of $200 billion, will be the most expensive single piece of private infrastructure ever built in the US, and third largest building in the world by floor area upon completion at 4 million square feet. It's expected to use at least 5 gigawatts of power across up to possibly 11 buildings, enough to power roughly 4 million homes in the US. And this is just one AI data center. By 2030, the world's data centers are projected to consume around 945 terawatt hours of electricity, more than double their 2024 footprint, and roughly equal to everything Japan uses today, with AI-specific capacity quadrupling in that same window. This sounds almost unbelievable, but it's true. So what are the logistics like behind these mega projects? Well, to understand what's happening now, you have to understand how data centers used to work. For most of their history, the biggest limitation wasn't electricity, it was latency, the time it takes for data to travel from a server to the person requesting it. The closer your server sat to the people using them, the faster everything loaded. So the map of data centers followed the map of population centers and fiber. That logic produced Loudoun County, Virginia, a suburban corridor about 30 miles west of Washington, D.C. that became known as Data Center Alley. It now holds 43 million square feet of facilities, drawing nearly 4,900 megawatts of power, enough to run about 3.5 million homes, and roughly 22% of the global internet traffic passes through this single county. Loudoun became the prototype because of two things. The first was a geographic accident. The county sat next to the MAE East, one of the earliest internet exchange points built in the early 1990s, where networks physically connected to each other. Fiber followed the exchange point, then companies followed the fiber. The second was a policy choice. Virginia offered a full sales tax exemption on data center equipment, which made building there cheaper than almost anywhere else in the country. Now, the pre-AI workload was latency sensitive, but not particularly power hungry. A typical server rack drew 10 to 14 kilowatts. It was all about proximity to users. And for nearly 3 decades, that model worked perfectly. Today, Northern Virginia is still the largest data center market in the world, but it can no longer absorb what's coming next, thanks to AI, because 3 things have scaled at once. The first was power density. A rack that used to draw 10 to 14 kilowatts now pulls 120 to 130. This NVIDIA rack, one of the top systems used for AI training and inference right now, draws the power of roughly 80 American homes and weighs about as much as a Toyota Camry. Next-generation accelerators are projected to push past 300 kilowatts per rack, an insane increase. Then there was heat density. All of that electricity becomes waste heat that has to be moved out of the building. To remove the heat from a 100 kilowatt rack using air alone, you'd need hurricane force airflow through the server room. Air cooling effectively stops working above about 20 kilowatts per rack. So the industry is shifting to what's called direct-to-chip liquid cooling, where fluid runs right over the processor. Liquids can be up to 3,000 times more efficient at absorbing heat than air. Lastly, there was network density. AI training is thousands of GPUs working as a single machine, and any chip that falls behind stalls the entire run. That means the network fabric inside these buildings has to be as fast and coordinated as the chips themselves. But here's the thing. What we call a data center is now 2 completely different things. There are training facilities, which run a single, gigantic, predictable workload. Latency doesn't matter because nobody's waiting in real time. They're just crunching through trillions of calculations in sequence. Training a model in Wyoming is just as fast as training it in Manhattan. Then there are inference facilities, which serve user queries in real time, like your ChatGPT queries. They have to be near users, run in unpredictable bursts, and respond in milliseconds. Inference is projected to account for 80 to 90% of lifetime AI costs and is growing fast. But the headline facilities costing hundreds of billions like Hyperion and OpenAI's Stargate are training campuses. Those are the projects rewriting the map, because once you don't need to be near your users, you can chase the cheapest, most abundant power. And that shift changes everything about what gets built, where it goes, and who has to live next to it. Now, before we get to where these things are going, we need to talk about why so many of them actually aren't getting built at all. Out of roughly 12 gigawatts of US data center capacity announced for 2026, only about a third is actually under construction. Half of the planned builds are delayed or cancelled. The reason for this is the bottleneck of high-voltage transformers, switchgear, grid-tie batteries, and the optical components that wire GPU clusters together. Demand for what's called generation step-up transformers, the devices that raise voltage from a power plant to transmission line levels, soared 274% between 2019 and 2025, increasing waiting times from 2 years to 5 years now. In April 2026, the US government invoked the Defense Production Act for transformers and high-voltage components, calling domestic manufacturing capacity dangerously limited. It's actually kind of funny. The AI race, which some people talk about like it's a software problem, is actually being won and lost by industrial supply chains for steel and copper components that haven't changed much in 50 years. So where are these things actually going? Well, increasingly the answer is Texas. And the reason comes down to a quirk of its grid. ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, runs the state's electrically isolated grid, covering about 90% of Texas's load. Unlike other US regions, where connecting new generation can take 5 to 8 years of federal review and multi-state coordination, ERCOT's Connect and Manage interconnection process gets new power online faster than anywhere else. Combine that with abundant land in West Texas, generous tax incentives, and a state government that actively wants the build-out, and you see why Texas is going to dominate this. The numbers are staggering. In 2025 alone, ERCOT received 225 new large load interconnection requests through mid-November, compared to just 152 requests across the entire 2022 to 2024 period combined. 87% of those requests are from data centers, and the number being seeked out is actually higher, at 418 gigawatts of electricity. The queue now represents 5 times the state's all-time peak electricity demand of 85.5 gigawatts. By 2028, Texas is projected to host over 40 gigawatts of data center capacity, nearly 30% of total US demand. According to some projections, Texas will overtake Virginia as the world's largest data center market by 2030. States like California, Oregon, and Iowa are projected to lose more than half their relative market share over the same window. Not because demand is falling, but because they can't permit fast enough. In addition to OpenAI's Stargate data center in Abilene, Texas, which draws 1.2 gigawatts of electricity, enough to power roughly 750,000 American homes, 6 additional sites have been announced. In Milam County and Shackleford, Texas, Donna Ana County, New Mexico, Lordstown, Ohio, Port Washington, Wisconsin, and Saline Township, Michigan. Planned capacity across all 7 sites is nearly 9 gigawatts, comparable to the peak power demand of New York City. It's even set to expand internationally too. And it's not just Stargate. Southaven, Mississippi has xAI's $20 billion Colossus expansion. The Dalles, Oregon hosts Google. In rural Louisiana, Meta agreed to fund 7 new natural gas plants through Entergy Louisiana just to keep Hyperion fed. A 30% increase to Louisiana's entire grid capacity from a single customer. In Wyoming, Meta is building a facility that will use more electricity than every home in the state combined. Amazon committed $20 billion for 2 in Pennsylvania. Individual buildings now routinely exceed 100,000 square feet and reach 90 feet tall, though they look unremarkable. According to a 2026 Pew Research Center report, 67% of planned data centers are now in rural areas, while 87% of existing ones are in urban ones. The map is inverting in real time. 3/4 of all planned data centers will be built in the South and Midwest. And once the building exists, it has to be fed. This is where the AI build-out collides with the American electrical grid, which is, to put it simply, not ready. The scale of the task is almost hard to comprehend. For over 2 decades, US power demand grew at less than 1% per year. It's now forecast at 5.7% annually for the next 5 years. Data centers accounted for roughly 50% of all US electricity demand growth in 2025 alone. They were just 4.4% of US electricity consumption in 2023. By 2028, they're projected to reach anywhere from 6.7 to 12%. There's so much power being needed that shortages are forecast to restrict 40% of AI data centers by 2027. In the PJM grid region, the largest wholesale electricity market in the US, serving 65 million people across 13 states, wholesale power supply costs jumped from $2.2 billion to $14.7 billion in 2025, with data centers driving nearly 2/3 of the increase. US data center demand is forecast to nearly double between 2025 and 2028, from roughly 80 to 150 gigawatts, like adding a country with the energy appetite of Spain in 3 years. Some companies are turning to nuclear to fill this gap. Microsoft is paying $1.6 billion to restart 3 Mile Island, the site of America's most infamous nuclear accident in 1979, to power AI. The plant's Unit 1 has been renamed the Crane Clean Energy Center, and it's expected online in 2027. Amazon secured a $650 million campus adjacent to Talon Energy's Susquehanna nuclear plant in Pennsylvania, and Google ordered small modular reactors from Kairos Power. Now, beyond the electricity question, there's another resource these buildings consume in enormous quantities: water. And this is where it gets personal for the communities hosting them. A 100 kilowatt rack generates heat equivalent to 5 residential furnaces running at once. Even with liquid cooling on the chip itself, the building still has to dump that heat to the outside world, and that's where evaporative cooling enters the story. A medium-sized data center can use 300,000 to 500,000 gallons of water per day for cooling. The largest facilities drink up to 5 million gallons a day, equivalent to a city of 50,000 people. Believe it or not, a 2026 UN report projected that by 2030, AI data centers could consume 9.3 trillion liters of water globally, enough for 1.3 billion people, while its land footprint may exceed 14,500 square kilometers, roughly twice the size of the Jakarta metropolitan area. And that's just direct cooling. The water used by the power plants generating the electricity these facilities need is often even more than that. But here's another problem. Evaporative cooling works best in dry climates, which are exactly the places where water is already fought over. Phoenix is a perfect example of this, a desert metro with a booming data center sector that raises nearby temperatures by up to 4 degrees, and a water system already stretched between the Colorado River, groundwater limits, reclaimed wastewater, and drought planning. Every new data center is showing up in a place where water is needed the most. Some centers, like Crusoe's, use just 10% of what a single American household uses per year, which is amazing. But those facilities trade water consumption for higher electricity use. That trade-off is the basic logic of every cooling decision in the industry, and which side wins depends almost entirely on local climate. So, what does all this actually mean for the towns where these things are landing? Electricity bills have risen as much as 267% near data centers, and 30% overall since 2020. But in terms of improvements to the city, a finished AI data center temporarily brings thousands of jobs during construction, and then barely any once it's running. They notoriously don't create that many jobs. To a county budget, it looks like the perfect taxpayer. Enormous property tax base, almost no school children, no commuter traffic, no service burden. To the residents next door, it looks like a windowless box that eats electricity, water, and land and gives almost nothing back. Both views are correct, which is why the same fight keeps playing out in every county they're in. Project cancellations quadrupled from 6 in 2024 to 25 in 2025. Maine became the first state to temporarily ban large data centers outright. There are many more examples too, and yet the money keeps coming because the demand is real. A single ChatGPT query requires 10 times more energy than a Google search. The models just keep getting bigger. The queries keep multiplying, and every one of them has to run somewhere physical, on silicon that gets hot, in a building that needs power, and in a community that unfortunately has to live next to it. The big irony of the AI era is that the smarter and more virtual our machines get, the bigger and more physical their footprint becomes. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. I'll see you in the next one.